Every year, millions of people report seeing shadow figures in the night, often writing it off as a bad dream or hallucination. Of the reported sightings, one common theme seems too eerie to ignore: a tall shadow of a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a trench coat. It's said that when you see him, he emanates negative energy and feeds off the fear he generates. While some have reported seeing him open and shut doors, he's often reported as just standing there, staring at you, peering deep into your soul. Some believe the Hat Man to be a demon, a spirit, or even the devil himself, while others believe there's a much more logical explanation to this, like sleep paralysis. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't believe in the Hat Man myself if I didn't have my own personal experience seeing him as a teenager. Is he real, or is there more to this phenomenon than meets the eye? Let me tell you my story and you decide. The year is 2005. My dad had just got married to my stepmom, and they were looking for a lake house at the Lake of the Ozarks. Yes, just like the show from Netflix. And what you need to know about the terrain at the Lake of the Ozarks is that a lot of these houses are built on a steep decline and are surrounded by tall green trees, meaning that you could be in the basement of your house and still be about 20 feet off the ground. We'd looked at a bunch of different houses around the lake, but none of them really felt right. And my parents had almost settled for a house until a realtor called us up one night and said, "You have to come look at this house. I think you guys would love it." It had 4 bedrooms and a steep walkway as you went down to the dock on the water. And I remember we were standing on the dock looking at the stars thinking, this is our house. We have to choose this one. And so we all went upstairs and started going through the different bedrooms of the house to pick out which one we would get if we moved in. Now, let me ask you, have you ever had those moments in your life where you walk into a room and for seemingly no reason, you're overcome with this feeling of anxiety so bad you can feel it in your stomach? Well, for some reason, as we were looking through these bedrooms, one specific bedroom gave me that feeling. It was the bedroom at the end of the hallway in the basement of this house. It was so bad that when we were standing in that room, I specifically told my stepmother, if we happen to move into this house, please, for the love of God, don't make me take this bedroom. I will literally take any room other than this one. A few months later, we move into the house, and that room specifically was assigned to me by the stepmother. Her reasoning was, it's the smallest room in the house, and I have less friends that I bring to our lake house, so my step siblings would want the bigger rooms for them and their friends. For the first week that we lived in that house, nothing really out of the ordinary happened, except for sometimes it'd be the middle of the day, I'd be on the main level of the house, and as I was turning in the peripheral vision of my eye, I would almost see what I thought would be a shadow figure that crossed the window. And this window, like we said, is about 10 to 20 feet off the ground, even higher off the ground than the basement. And it happened so quick in my peripheral vision that I even thought to myself, like, wait, did I really just see something cross the window? I specifically remember one detail, and that was it had on a wide-brimmed hat, kind of like the hat the monster from the movie Jeepers Creepers was wearing. But I kind of just wrote it off and went about my day. Then a few nights later, I was laying in my bedroom. It was like 1 or 2 a.m. I was getting tired, so I went to go turn off the TV, and the first thing I noticed on the window, it was a large shadow figure, and it was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and what seemed to be a smooth trench coat. So I kind of looked at it, and I was like, no, surely that's the trees casting a shadow against the window. But this shadow itself had clearly defined lines, and the trees behind it were naturally waving. And so I turned the TV back on, and as soon as the TV was on and there was more light in the room, the shadow would disappear. Obviously freaked out, I turned the TV on and went to sleep and tried to not think about the shadow at all. But here's where it gets crazy. The very next night, I saw the same exact shadow. In fact, I saw that shadow in that same window in the same position every single night, never moving, never changing shape. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did I ever tell anybody about what I was seeing? The answer is no. I was so petrified by this thing, I had no logical explanation for. I thought I would be seen as crazy if I ever tried to tell anybody. Plus, I always got this weird feeling that because I'm seeing it so often, maybe if I tried to show it to someone else, it wouldn't show itself on purpose. For that reason, I figured before I ever try to tell anybody, rule out any possible explanation. So during the daytimes, I would go down to the dock and I would stare at the trees by my bedroom window, trying to look for some formation of branches that may potentially form the shape of a man wearing a top hat and a trench coat. And I even made note of the fact that I could see this no matter what time of day it was, because the tree that was in front of my window would make this room naturally dark anyways when all the lights were off. I eventually even got to the point where I could go into that room and almost ignore the anxiety that I would immediately start feeling, and I'd look at the shadow and just study it. Sometimes I'd even look at it and start blurring my eyes to see if maybe my eyes were playing a trick on me. And from my observations, after 3 years trying to come up with any logical explanation I could, I finally came to the conclusion that I was in fact seeing a shadow that was not being cast by the trees outside and could be clearly seen any time of the day as long as there was no artificial light in the room. And by the time I was comfortable with that conclusion, the only last thing I had to test by this point was trying to show it to someone else and see seeing if it would be visible to them as well. So I invited one of my good friends, Bobby, to come to the lake with me. I grew up with the guy, so he's been at this lake house many times over the course of our high school years, but I'd never really said anything about this shadow to him. All he knew was that I didn't like to sleep in that room if we didn't have to. So I go upstairs one last time by myself to confirm, do I see the shadow on the window in that bedroom? Sure enough, I see it, and I almost send this thought to it saying, today's the day. Are you gonna show yourself or not? And so I go downstairs, go talk to Bobby, telling him all the details that I just told you. And he said, okay, show it to me. So we go upstairs, we go into the room, I shut the door, and much to my surprise, it wasn't there. And from that day forward, I never saw the Hat Man again. Until 10 years later, I'm sitting here in Phoenix, Arizona, scrolling on Amazon Prime, looking for a movie to watch, and I come across this movie right here. And it stopped me in my tracks because I immediately recognized the shape of the shadow on the thumbnail. And up to this point, I had never had a logical explanation nor a name for what this phenomenon was. So I started watching the film, and I had to turn it off within 5 minutes of watching it, because not only did it confirm what I'd seen a decade prior at the Lake of the Ozarks, but it also confirmed that other people had seen the exact same thing that I saw. A large, tall shadow with a trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat. It was such an eerie epiphany for me that it took me 3 attempts to finish watching the movie entirely. Every person on the film had a very similar experience that I had. The same feeling of fear and anxiety when in the same room as the Hat Man. The same experience of the shadow disappearing immediately when any artificial light was present. And the same feeling like you're being watched by someone or something in the shadows. Here's where it gets crazy. If you Google the Hat Man and you look at the images, you'll see a bunch of different variations of what the Hat Man might look like. But almost like a police lineup, to every person who's ever actually experienced this, myself included, we can immediately point to this image of the exact shadow that we saw. This image, detail by detail, proportion by proportion, is the exact same shadow that I saw every night I spent in that room from age 15 to 18. Leaving me to wonder, what is the Hat Man and why do people see him? Many people into paranormal things write off shadow figures as a demonic presence. Scientists write off shadow figures as hallucinations during sleep paralysis. And Ancient Aliens even released an episode recently about shadow people, alluding to an extraterrestrial origin. I guess I could see where people are coming from on that, because the top hat is somewhat similar to what you'd imagine the Men in Black wear. However, I recently came up with my own theory that maybe there's an interdimensional element to this. What if electrical signals and artificial light weaken whatever link exists between our dimension and whatever dimension this thing is from? And what if the classic top hat and trench coat is actually just some form of technology in that dimension that allows them to access this dimension? It's just a hypothesis, but it's one that I brought up to James KEENAN, who's a researcher from Skinwalker Ranch. I was interviewing him last year, and I told him my theory on the interdimensional element to shadow figures based on my experience, because shadow figures are a common occurrence at Skinwalker Ranch. And he told me he thinks shadow people are jinn, which is an invisible spirit often referenced in the Islamic religion. What's even more ironic is my family moved out of that house in 2012, and in the 10 years since we've lived there, that house has been sold twice. Maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe there's a logical explanation to that too. Have you ever seen the Hat Man? If not, maybe think twice when turning out the lights tonight. And if you're thoroughly freaked out right now like I am, just wait until you see this video right here, where I reveal the secret group who may have actually been behind the controversial Georgia Guidestones and who may have blown them up.